in all, I'm especially excited tonight because Matthew Rose is back in the house. Literally, actually, he's in his house, but he's back.
I'm in a shed. Well, thank you for having me back. I missed you guys a whole bunch, and I love this show. I loved watching it while I was gone. You guys do a great job. Always interesting, always entertaining, and always a joy to be back with you guys.
Yay! And we, of course, are back with Tom Goldrup and Jim Goldrup. They are film historians. They've written 4 books on the golden age of Hollywood, and they've done all kinds of other crazy things. They're writers and actors and blah, blah, blah. And that's why we're talking with Tom and Jim. Welcome tonight to your show.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
I say the same things when we start off every single time. I should just have like a disclaimer. It goes, yeah, these guys, this is what they do. You know, film historians, they're the writers, they're actors. I have to always mention Mary Beth Hughes, and then we go into what we're really talking about for the night. Which tonight I'm excited, very excited actually, because we're going to be talking about Star Trek, the original Star Trek.
That's the one with Harrison Ford and Alec Guinness and Mark Hamill.
No. That was Star Wars. This is Star Trek with William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy by Spock, DeForest Kelly was Doc.
I remember DeForest Kelly and all those westerns.
You do?
Yeah. And I remember an episode. Yep. William Shatner is sitting there and he looks out of a window and sees this monster tearing about.
No. That was Twilight Zone. This is Star Trek, a space movie, a space series, about the Enterprise.
I remember that one. It's the Beam Me Up Scotty one.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay.
Which, by the way, they never said "Beam Me Up, Scotty" in the history of the show. It's just
what?
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy.
One of those, old, wives' tales. Sort of like Rick never said, "Play it again, Sam."
Yeah, he never did.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, welcome, guys. Let's talk Star Trek. I know that in the course of your time in LA and elsewhere, who knows where, but you've known a lot of actors and actresses who were on the original Star Trek series, and so I thought it would be fun to talk about them and any stories that you have related to that.
Well, one, William Campbell, he played a kind of English dandy in one called The Spirit of Gothos, and then later on he was Captain Koloth in Trouble with Tribbles, and that went over really big, and he reprised his role several years later in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh, that's right.
And Michael Ansara, who had a long career in films, he was mentioning to us some of his favorite TV shows that he had been in, and one he said he's especially fond of is when he played a Cleon in an episode of Star Trek.
Oh, he was Kang in Klingon's name was Kang. Yeah. Let's go back. I'd love to dissect all of this. Mostly because I don't know if you guys know this. I know I mentioned it a little bit on a previous episode, but I was a huge Star Trek fan when I was a teenager. And I would go out to Pasadena once a year to the big convention there, and I, would wear my nerdy uniform, and which I'd be grateful I did not break out tonight. But but I would, I was a huge Star Trek fan, and so in kind of preparing for this, I spent the last week rewatching a lot of these episodes that I knew you were going to talk about, and it's just so amazing to me, revisiting this after all these years for me, just how great of a show it was. Yeah. Like ahead of its time.
Yep.
Still managing to be relevant in its time anyway. The messaging, the analogies, so much. And I know everyone knows Star Trek, right? But I think that going back to its roots, to the original, you realize why it became so big, because of how powerful it was. As far as
I was instantly in love with it. So I think I was in 4th or 5th grade, and the neighbor kid's like, "Hey, we're watching Star Trek. You should come over." And this is long before Star Wars ever was even a twinkle in George Lucas's eye. And it was, and I went over and watched it, and I was mesmerized because it wasn't action packed, but it was never boring, and it definitely transported you to a different world. And it could be funny, and it could be totally scary. Like, there was times where it was just straight up terrifying, the concepts that they were working on. And I do think it stands the test of time. It's such a great show. And of course, there's been so many shows, so many Star Trek shows since then. You guys were talking about, an actor who was able to come back as a different character. Did Star Trek do that a lot? Do you guys know, where they reused actors in different roles?
There was William Campbell, and I think there was one other actor, and I don't remember off the top of my head who it was, that came back as another character once.
Morgan Woodward came back.
Oh, Morgan Woodward. Morgan Woodward.
Yeah.
Who was a very good friend of ours, super good friend of ours. He did too, and he got nominated for an Emmy for the episode "Daggers of the Mind."
Rewatching the Morgan Woodward episodes this week, I watched both Daggers of the Mind and the Omega Glory was the other one, and it was fascinating that in Daggers of the Mind, he played the hero who is made out to be the villain. So when you see him and all the stuff that's going on with him, you think he's the villain, and it turns out that he's actually the hero.
Wow.
And then in the Omega Glory, he's portrayed as the hero, and it turns out he's really the villain.
Wow.
And it was fascinating to watch them back to back in that way. There were different seasons, I believe, and everything, but just to see it. And it was so funny because after watching Daggers of the Mind, I was like, oh, I can't wait to see him be a good guy. And then he comes out and you're like, oh, right, now I get the root for him. And then you're like, oh, so it's very interesting. And I met Morgan Woodward, as we talked about before, briefly. I mean, this would be like when I was a teenager at these conventions. Such a nice guy, really took the time. I still have an autographed, picture of him, and he was just super nice to us. I remember.
Yeah, and another person that we talked to, it was in our Growing Up on the Set book with the child actors, was a girl named Beverly Washburn, and she was in one episode where it was the second season, and the series really wasn't even that popular at the time when it was playing originally, and she played a little girl that got a virus that aged her, and then everybody else starts aging too, and they die and stuff. And she said it took 4.5 hours sitting in the makeup room to get a plaster cast made of her face. Wow. And while that was drying, she had to breathe through a straw. And then they took that plaster cast and made a plastic mask out of it. And that's what she wore in the film. And she said it was a bit tricky, but it was fun. And what was amazing to her, she said, and why it becomes one of her favorites, was because 32 years later, she was going out on Star Trek tours. And at the time, you never thought, Star Trek wasn't popular, it was going to disappear and nobody would remember it. And so, yeah, it was quite a show.